Woo! Happy 10th anniversary! Bro! You do remember that the first video came out in 2014 on May 19th, correct? Well, excuse me, Trix. Is it really my fault that May 19th came out on a Sunday and we don't do any work on Sunday? Instead of blaming me, we should blame... Right. We should blame the almighty God Kronos!
Meanwhile, in the color dimension.
Why are they blaming me? I'm just watching over it all time and space. And why are you people not even viewing the screen? Go to the next shot.
Meanwhile, back in the pony dimension.
So, what are we going to do? Well, first, I'm doing a whole entire freaking reboot of Sweet Taste of Cake, the first fic I've ever done on this channel. Then, I'm going after an old friend in honor of Fandom Fridays, which I would do more of, but my schedule for work gets crazy. And then, maybe a few more requests. But until then, let's start. A Sweet Taste of Cake by The Descendant. Chapter 1. The Dance. Since the frosting seemed to be ready, Cupcake used the confectioner's tube to test it by gently placing a large white dollop across the nose of her husband. Carrot's eyes crossed. He looked first at the frosting, then turned to her with a smile. As he tilted her head, her own smile grew and answered his. With a little giggle, she went out to fetch more components of their unfolding creation. The sweet smell of gingerbread drifted around the kitchen's super cute corner. The gingerbread came closer to being ready, the heat of the oven falling over them, draping its warmth in the soft smell of what sat within the roundly happy pair. The gingerbread house had been a special order. He had begun working on it as the day had broke. The two went about purposely, determined that they would complete this work together, that the two of them would bring it to fruition. Carrot prepared the board, laying the wax paper across it evenly so it lay taut. He quietly surveyed it, his eyes focusing past the little mound of frosting as he inspected his work. Happy with his efforts, he surveyed the tools. The bowls, the spoons, the measuring cups, all seemed ready for the crafting of the gingerbread house. All was in order. He closed his eyes. It was heartwarming eve, and he listened to Cupcake as she hummed a holiday tune. He felt the warmth of the oven sifting in unseen waves as she began to pull the trays from within. As they waited for the pieces to cool on the baking rack, they cut off any slight imperfections by slowly sawing away any speck of bubbled surface that blemished on the gingerbread. With that, all that remained was to wait. She moved beside him and rubbed the length of his body before nuzzling beneath his chin. Ba-dum, dum-dum-dum. Her humming brought his eyes down to hers, a redness growing in him as she did. She tossed her head, motioned towards the grouping of largest and flattest of pieces, ones that resembled the dance floor. Da-dum, dum-da-dum. She continued as he pressed against him, beginning to sway gently. He joined her in the rhythm as a memory of a day now long past slipped across the two of them in time. Oh, don't look now, love, for you've got a first request for a dance coming down this way. The other bear shifted a giggle, and lifted her head from a little drink. Across his eyes, and tossed her gray mane, she let her gaze flit from her behind her glasses. She saw the colt, making his way towards them, bouncing off the downstairs and waiting for the other revelers to pass as he did. She smiled at Dance and turned to her companion. I do believe you're mistaken, Cuppy dear, she said, lowering her head and whispering to the ear of her cake. It's the cake colt. He's had eyes on you since we tried in here. Cupcake glanced and spun her head around exactly in the same way she just warned Ivory not to. There was a moment of panic as her eyes accidentally met the green ones of the cult. He blushed sheepishly as he waited for more dancers to part before him. Her head went to the table, the mare using one hoof to shield her from view. But, that can't be, Ive, Cupcake exclaimed as she startled. And why not? Because you always get to ask to dance first. I hardly ever get to dance, and when I do, it's those colts who know my father. Well, said Ivory heavily, looking over the top of the glasses at all the ponies assembled within the dance hall. There's one streak that ends rather soon. But what should I say? Pleaded Cupcake. My suggestion would be yes. Oh, hello, kid. How are you this evening?
Oh, hello, miss.
He began, stretching his neck forward and down, attempting to answer her. The gangly colt looking as small as he did. None of that, Carrot, she answered with a smile. We all have father's meal. Please just call me Ivory. Have you met my dear friend Cupcake? The colt's eyes lifted immediately, meeting the gaze he had sought all night. She spun in a look out, and the uncertainty lying across her own face as she looked at the colt. He stared down at her, trying to speak, but instead getting caught in her eyes. You know, this was made more recently. Pear would be here. Her beautiful, rose-colored eyes. He swam in them for an instant before finding his words.
Oh, yes, I know, I actually have seen her, you, Miss Cupcake, but I haven't all the chance. You see, I wanted to introduce...
Just ask her to dance already, Carrot, interrupted Ivory as he leaned in to take a sip of her drink. Both looked at the simping mare, and then quickly back to each other again. Cupcake found herself staring upon a colt who was obviously growing more and more nervous as the moments passed. Would you care to dance? He asked finally, swallowing his nerves. Cupcake looked at Ivory. The mare arched an eyebrow at her. She remembered the earlier advice, as she breathed a yes before putting her hoof to his. Ivory smirked to herself as the two ponies went off, watching Carrot do his best to clear the crowd so they could pass. She usually hated being here on Fridays. It was always so crowded. Then again, that's why she had demanded to come. She knew that today was the day that Carrot came, hoping to hide in the crowd. That, of course, was why she badgered Cupcake into accompanying her. They were just barely invisible among the throng of ponies, but she smiled to herself as she watched the couple begin an awkward little dance. She giggled softly and took another sip, and looked around the many sets of eyes that were all nodding and smiling at her. Friday. It was not the most graceful dance that the old hall had ever seen. Only the conversation was more awkward. Cupcake winced inwardly each time that the weak-jawed colt tried to speak, expecting each statement to be the one that would betray his interest in her father's business, thinking that the next few words would be the ones that revealed him to be just like the other colts. The old dance floor groaned beneath the weight of the couples. Cupcake laughed a bit inwardly as this colt, Carrot, tried simultaneously to lead around the floor and avoid the other dancers. As he tried to engage her in conversation, he would suddenly look rather perturbed and turn to apologize to a blushing mare or scowling colt. He would then ask her where they had been going with the conversation as he blushed. She found herself smiling as he both tried to focus on her and quickly stammered through apologies. As he quickly went through the last of what she recognized were obviously practiced questions, Cupcake realized he had only been asking about her. That he really was only interested in her. Her sympathy rose for the gangly call as he sighed. This, isn't going too well. No, it isn't, she answered, over the music and hummed the crowd. For to her alarm, he seemed to deflate. But, she continued, running her hoof along his foreleg, much to her own surprise at his. Please, don't stop trying. Carrot's ears came up. He lifted his head and looked at the open windows of the dance hall. Beyond them, the lanterns and hung from the eaves of the porch bonded pools of light, holding back the gathering dusk. Miss Cupcake, what? He stuttered. He took another breath to apologize to another couple, that spun away before he had finished speaking. Do you think we could go out onto the porch? Oh, I thought you would never ask, she giggled. Cupcake tucked in beside him and used his frame to slice between the couples in the crowd. At her table, Ivory watched them fight out through the door at the far side of the hall. Once nearest, the man said, Well, she thought with a slight chuckle, that certainly took long enough. The flickering lights in the lanterns competed with the flash of the lightning bugs in the grass beyond the dance hall. As Carrot and Cup moved from the glow of one lantern to the next, they looked for an open spot along the railing. Soon they found one. They sat there, looking out past Ponyville into the fields of grass, beyond where the insects appeared as pinpricks of light that rubbered and flowed with wobbling trails.
Oh, I should have asked if you'd like to drink,
he said, putting himself across his eyes.
No, I'm alright,
She said, looking down, biting her hoof along Swinter. The old dance hall had seen better days. Perhaps it did not have much time left despite its popularity. She realized that he had gone quiet. Colt was simply looking at her and blushing. She thought about that for a moment, and then returned a smile. He used up all his prepared questions. He was out of things to say. He did not know how to go on. All of his carefully practiced words had been spent back out there on the crowded, noisy dance floor. Yet he still sat there blushing, still looking at her with a dopey smile. Thank you. Thank you for the dance. I really wanted to talk to you, ever since I saw you walking with Miss Ivory at the mill, he began.
Oh, yes, I saw you pinking at me that one time, and the other time,
she answered, voice showing that she was glad he had found something they could discuss. Oh, you did? He said with some surprise. I didn't mean to stare, but... She smiled and moved a bit closer to him. Sat beside him as the little pools of lantern light fell over them.
No, it's fine. Thank you, she said softly. I never get to ask dance all that much. I always get asked first, and I have to sit there, don't you know? All the pretty males get asked before I do, the ones who aren't as round.
You aren't that round, he said. At once, the Colt bolted in place, shock watching over him. With a sigh, he lowered his hand to the railing of the porch, resting there as she looked down with subtle disappointment. I should have said, you aren't round. That's what I was supposed to say, right? Spoke Carrot, turning his head slightly, looking at her with one eye. This isn't going very well. She gave a little laugh. She slowly rested her head on the railing as well, turning it so she peered at him with a small smile. He looked ridiculous, slowly banging his head on the old weather-woven railing that rattled and shook with each strike. But he wanted to talk with her, dance with her, even if it was just for a little while. Was just interested in meeting her. Just her.
Well, no, it isn't, but... she said softly. Please don't stop trying.
Kara seated his self-depreciation and waited for the sawdust to stop falling from the ancient railings before turning his head. She was leaning upon it too, her face being revealed as he tilted slowly towards her. There was a soft expression over her face. Her perfect rose-colored eyes caught his as he sat in the lantern light. Those eyes. The porch was mostly deserted now. The other couples who had been crowding it had either broken up in disappointment, or, for those who the evening was progressing much more pleasantly, and made for the field of tall grass and woods just beyond. The music of the dance hall began again, the sound drifting over them through the open windows. Ba-da, da-dum-dum. Began the music once more, flowing out to where they stood beside the railing. She lifted her foreleg, moving across to him just a little bit. He lifted himself and gathered up her offered hoof, and led her to the open space beside the windows. Da-dum, dum-da-dum. Continued the song as they began their dance once more. Together they swayed back and forth as the tune fell over them. They moved from pool of light to pool of light that the lanterns cast over the long porch. She moved her eyes from his, touching her cheek to his just for an instant, before laying her head across his withers. With that, they danced their dance for a good long while, as fireflies flashed along the tall grass in the woods beyond. Being Quarry means that since the day you were old enough to say your name, you know it had two meanings. Being Quarry means feeling your strength, knowing where to pull resources from, how to accomplish things. It means being resourceful, strong and forceful like the very rock of the world's foundation. Being Quarry also means feeling pursued, hunted. It means feeling, knowing that they're always trying to take everything from you. Being Quarry means having to be strong, proud, and if need be, brutal. The walls of the gingerbread house lifted easily from the wax paper. Carefully, delicately, the two ponies removed each piece from the paper, letting each large portion slide daintily upon the drying rack. Cupcake looked the largest sections over, glancing up to her husband as he nodded at each piece approvingly. She giggled quietly to herself as he turned away, knowing that the large bit of frosting still clung to his nose, and it still stood starkly where he had laid it as the project had begun. He readied himself before the board, wordlessly taking up the familiar spot that he occupied every time they had worked on a project of this type. With that, the two began a familiar dance, one they had practiced time and time again, yet each time new and wonderful. He held up the first two pieces of gingerbread in place, held the one that would become a wall to the foundation. Slowly, Cupcake drew the confectioner's tube along the side of the seam, leaving a trail of perfectly even frosting to bind the pieces of gingerbread together. With practice hose, they followed these steps, attaching each new component, laying this firm foundation that the gingerbread house depended upon. Finally, after a long, cautious, and wordless moment, they completed the foundation. To Kara's surprise, she finished the last seam by stepping into his outstretched forelegs as he held the two halves together. As the frosting emptied from the tube, the last line was completed, so he stepped back into his chest, resting there as they both waited to see if it would stand on its own. As he moved into his embrace, he lifted his head so that the doll with frosting on his nose would not catch and remain. He carefully lowered his head again, laying his cheek to hers as they watched, waited and hoped that what they built could stand long enough to become one solid piece. In their thoughts, the two raced back to a time when things had not been so certain, when they too were just starting to make a foundation.
"You don't need to keep picking around the corners, Cuppy," said Ivory, flipping through some papers on the desk. "I promise you he's here. We'll go in a minute. Look, that's his name on the timesheet."
Cupcake started peering skitishly up and down the middle floor from the office floor, and looked instead to the large board that hung on the wall. As he followed the long list of names until her eyes settled on his. Carrot Cake, he read in small, rather plain script. She looked at the little name, lingering for a moment.
"Oh, Ive, do you think you asked me to...
Cupcake said, turning within the office. Ivory slowly moved from the stacks of paper to stacks of papers, lifting them seamlessly at random and giving each one an introspective hum.
"I don't see why not. He was quite taken with you Friday. As a matter of fact, I don't see why he hadn't asked you then,"
she spoke, setting the paper down.
"I honestly don't know why,"
Ivory said, looking puzzled.
"I can't say he hadn't asked you why he hadn't asked you then."
Cupcake only had barely heard Ivory's puzzlement, and already returned to the door, staring up and down the long reaches of the mill.
"Oh, Ive, what am I going to do if he doesn't ask me?"
she asked in a worried tone.
"Well, then you'll so be the one to ask him,"
replied the other mayor as he watched Cupcake steal long looks outside the door. Cupcake turned again, the mayor almost looking surprised.
Is it okay to do that?"
she asked in an earnest tone.
"I mean, I don't think I found me. You've done so many more times than I have."
Ivy arched an eyebrow as she raised one of her forelegs.
"Oh, I don't mean it that way. You know I don't,"
called Cupcake as he trotted back quite close to where her oldest friend stood. She nuzzled Ivory's chin, drawing the mare's hair up to her withers. As he did, Cupcake spoke in a high, almost worried tone.
I don't know why I'm like this. I've been thinking about him all weekend,"
she said, still resting her head on the withers of the other mare.
"He just wanted to talk with me. I've been trying to since the first time he saw me. Oh, he didn't care I'm a little round, don't you know? Me, I'm not talking about father or his business, just me. Oh, Ive, why do I feel this way?"
Ivory laughed a small laugh and laid her head deeper against Cupcake's.
"Oh, you honestly don't know, do you? You honestly don't... Oh, Cupcake, Cuppy, you have no idea how dear you are,"
Ivy said in a quiet tone as she let her friend rest upon her for a moment longer. Cupcake lifted her head and looked at Ivory as though she wanted to ask a question. Before she could speak, Ivory had already gathered up her hoof and was leading her out the door. With a small gasp, Cupcake entered the mill door. As they went, slight traces of stray flour went through the shafts of light that came in through the windows. High above the bagging rooms, great belts turned the wheels that drove the mechanisms of the mill. As the great water wheel turned the towers of the river into power to drive the machines, it cast cylindrical shadows into the high, hot places in the mill. In one such place, Colt struggled, cursing to himself as a bag of flour he was supposed to be tending fell to the floor. He knew enough not to put the split flour back into the sack. As still more flour came pouring out of the grindstones, he fought to figure out what to do with what had fallen in a large sack. He kicked at it and tried to kick it away. All that accomplished was to make the flour rise up in a cloud that stained his legs white. Carrot sighed as the floor supervisor, Trammell, caught sight of him and began trotting towards the stall. I'm sorry, Trammell. It just got away from me, said Carrot, gathering the broom into the space beneath his shoulder and along his foreleg, sweeping as much of the flour as he could into the sill.
Good, lad. This is your second misbag this morning, spoke the large earth pony. You're mostly more keen than that. Are you well?
No. I mean, yes! Oh, no. I don't mean I'm sick or anything, but... began Carrot, taking a deep sigh, trying his best to keep the new bag in filling position, even as he cleared the old one away. I'm at Mare Friday at the old dance hall, and the whole weekend I've been... Trammell arched an eyebrow and smiled slightly as a blissful expression fell over the face of the colt. I've been thinking about her all weekend, he said softly as he looked up at Trammell. You met her, actually. Well, see her. See Miss Ivory's friend, Miss Cupcake, the mare who's here with her from time to time. Trammell took a few steps back and called out a sing-song tone along the bag of stalls.
Hello, what's this? Fellows, it turns out like cake next to Maldon's,
announced the stallion. Laughter came from nearby bagging stalls, rising over the sounds of bells and wheels. Soon, nearby colts were shouting from their own opinions.
Hey, subsides! What do you look for in a mirror? Breathing works, I ain't picky.
Trammell smiled throughout as he returned back, saw Carrot staring at the floor. She's not that round, said Carrot. The colt raised its head to the newly filled bag of flour, listened to the constantly turning belted bins. With that, it was first raised up and over the wheel, and then down to the mill below.
Good, sorry, lad,
said Trammell, as he cleared away the last of the spilled flour.
Didn't mean anything by it. Did you ask her for a date?
There was a thud. Trammell looked up to see the weak-jawed colt banging his head against the inside of the stall. No, but I want to. I just froze up. I can't believe it. I froze up. Carrot banged his head against the stall once more, then turned back to his bag. All I could do was Miss Ivory came to take her home and say goodnight over and over like an idiot. I'm sure she liked dancing with me. I think she liked being with me, Sarah said, his voice getting stronger as he spoke. She's so beautiful. But that's not even half of it. She was also understanding, and when things went wrong, she was calm and certain. Forgiving. Carrot turned to the older pony, looking for advice. Trammell, what am I going to do? I don't know why I feel this way. I've never felt this way for a mare before, he asked the older pony. Carrot saw something of panic shoot out of the eyes of his supervisor as the Clifton drifted along the fields of flour.
It appears as though you've got a chance to explore those fields, lad. Here comes the big fisher's daughter, and he's got your fat, fair damsel with her, he said as Trammell raced off to make sure his floor was spick and span. Oh, Celestia! Cried Carrot, darting back within the bagging stall. As he heard the hose of Ivory and Cupcake draw closer, he ran his forelegs through his hair to straighten it. As he realized he had just streaked flour through his mane, he yelled at himself. He beat his body against the stall to shake loose whatever flour he could, and then turned back to his bag, attempting to look as though he hadn't heard him coming. His eyes went wide as he realized that this bag, too, was nearly full, and only seconds were tipping over. He quickly pushed it into the clutch, pulled out the old bag, and placed the new one beneath the grindstone's outlet. As he reached the clutched flour and once more poured it into his stall. With some practiced effort, he lifted the large bag into constantly circling containers, watched it first travel up and then down past the wheel to the mill below. And then turned around just in time to see the tails of Cupcake and Ivory pass by, having missed them completely while his back was turned to them. He sank against the stall wall with a disgusted sound. Why couldn't it be easy? Ivory smiled as he crossed the floor, nodding and greeting her father's employees. Cupcake's head, however, was on a swivel, and the mare looking left and right, searching the banging floor as they went. As they came upon the banging stalls, she heard Ivory's name called over the sound of grindstones. Seeing it was the supervisor who called for them, they tried to where he waited. Good morning, Trammell, spoke Ivory. Good morning, Miss Script, and good morning to you too, Miss Cupcake.
Cupcake smiled at him and replied, happy the supervisor had somehow remembered her name. He looked at her knowingly, a slight smile that he could not place sitting on his face. Miss Cupcake! She heard her name called over the sounds of bells. Miss Cupcake! It came again, completing with the wheels. She looked around, up and down the mill floor, at once both anxious and eager. She had thought it came from bagging stalls, yet, when she looked that way, only a flash of movement. Cupcake spun and looked to the length of the mill in the other direction. Had it been an illusion? No, sir, did she had done so to the name came ringing out from the stalls. She spun around in time to dismiss it once more. Ivory giggled to herself, even as she continued to speak with Trammell. She lifted her rear hoof and planted it against Firmly's Cupcake's posterior. A slightly more gentle nudge, she sent her friend cantering into the line of bagging stalls. Trammell looked at Ivory with a meaningful smirk. Ivory tossed her head in a gesture to follow. Soon they were watching the scene as it unfolded. Cupcake cautiously crept around the stalls, poking her head into each slightly. As she came to the last one in line, she poked her head within. Karen turned from the bag again, instead of having to call her name in such a ungentle way, having to shout over the bells. "Let's cut!" he began, before turning to the opening stall. With that, their noses met. For a long moment they stood there, nose to nose, green eyes cast down into the pool of rose-colored ones. The two held their gaze for what seemed like a perfect eternity. With that, Flower began pouring out Carrot's bag. "Oh!" cried Cupcake, noticing the white rising cloud. "I'm sorry." Carrot turned to face the unfolding disaster. He caught the bag just in time, trying to go through the motions while still speaking to her. "No, it's fine," he said, pestering the clutch with one hoof, while trying to adjust the bag to close it. "It's fine, really." As he tried to place a new bag on the siphon, he turned to try and speak with her again. His hoof came off the clutch just long enough for a single poof of flour to shower his forelegs. "Oh, dear, I didn't mean to." "Really, it's okay, I was just trying to—" "Bag?" "No, yes, thank you," he said as he slipped a new one across the spigot. As he did, he lifted the bag up to its containers, giving a little groan as he did so, from the unfamiliar position, leaving her for room for a woman's doll. I was hoping you would come around today. I had a great time at the— Clutch! Wait, I'm glad. Dance, right now?" The two continued the stirring conversation. Soon stifled giggles arose around him. "You're no help, Ive!" Coke called, giving a disapproving glance. "You don't help at all."
Hello, you two. I do believe they charge for double occupancy. I say, did you remember to sign on the timesheet before starting today, Miss Cupcake?"
Asked Trammell, to a small laugh of his own. "Yeah," spoke Cupcake, touching her hoof to Carrot's foreleg, instantly capturing its attention. "Let's do it this way, okay?" Soon, she had worked out a system, Carrot marveling at her decisiveness. Shortly, they were able to work and speak to each other at the same time. "What I was trying to say is that I really had a great time dancing," she said as she depressed the clutch, scooting a bag filled closer to the containers. I'm so glad," Carrot replied, removing a filled bag and placing a new one beneath the siphon. He then lifted the filled bag just as he had placed me before the containers. "I was really hoping you did," he said, blushed. "Well, yes, I did," she replied. For a moment, they worked silently. Ivory closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Carrot did as well and turned to face the mare that stood near him. "I was wondering, Miss Cupcake," he began, "maybe if you'd like to—" "Yes?" she answered quietly. "Really?" he replied enthusiastically. I'm sorry, what?" she began, taking her hood off the clutch in confusion. In an instant, their newfound regiment broke down, and flour once more pulled out of the spigot. "This is a silly word." As Ivory and Tamara laughed, Carrot attempted to place a new bag while moving full one to the containers, Nicole simultaneously holding in the clutch in a display of aerobic prowess. This left lifting the large bag the only useful thing that Cupcake could do. She attempted to heft the large, heavy sack into the hopper, giving a cry as she missed it by fractions of an inch. Her rear hose danced as she stood upon them, missing a second hopper as well. With that, she began to topple. "I got you!" Carrot called, seeing that it was about to happen. Which, by the way, "I've Got You" is the official song of this fanfic. And once his forelegs came up around her, his spine lifted up around her. His hose slid across the length of her forelegs from behind, pushing the bag higher and leaving her wrapped around his legs. For Cupcake, that moment grew, drifted around her. As his forelegs met hers, his frame encompassed her. The sensation of being in contact with him flashed through her. To her, it was as though they were dancing again, and all wonderful feelings they shared rose up in her once more. She did not know why, but as he held the bag above them, she surrendered her hold on it. He willfully leaned against his chest, still there,
Let her head lay there. It felt somehow welcoming, inviting. She gave a small gasp of realization. Finally, in that instant, realized why he had been in her head over those last few days. As he gave her gasp, it drove through him like a soft call of doves. At once, the feel of her upon his chest filled him, and he went stark still. Gravity was unimpressed by the touching scene that was playing out, simply pulled on a string of causality. And with that, the bag of flour toppled over them. Ivory's hoof had gotten out of her hoof in alarm. Once the flour cleared, it revealed two figures unharmed by the accident. Her alarm gave way to a tearful expression as he saw how closely the two figures stood, covered together from forehead to hoof in a perfect coating of white. Cupcake felt Karis' foreleg lift from her eyes. As he did, she realized he had placed him on there in the last instant, keeping her safe from harm. She turned and looked at him. The entirety of Weakjaw Holtz was covered in flour. As Trammell pulled to safety, it ended the cascade of flour pouring from the spigot. Cupcake smiled and lifted her hoof over his face. Karen felt Cupcake's hoof drawing across him, slamming her soft touch as she removed the flour from over his eyes. Soon he heard her say,
They're clear now.
He blinked, as his green eyes once more met her rose-colored ones. Miss Cupcake? He said as he blinked, a smile growing through the flour. I'd like to see you again. Can I, please, have a date?
Oh, I'd love to,
she said, placing her hoof alongside his as they sat looking to each other. Slow puffs of white rose around him.
I'd love to. How about this Saturday?
Sure, yes, he said, argusively returning. Meet you at the gazebo?
Oh, yes, that sounds wonderful,
she answered as he blushed brightly, the hue visible through her new coat of white. Around them, the flowers swirled, and for a long while their eyes laid upon one another. As Ivory led Cupcake off to get cleaned up, she could not help but notice how well the two marched up, arrayed together as they were in white.
Saturday,
said Cupcake, looking back where he stood.
At the gazebo. Noon, righty?
Righty, he answered. She trotted away with a giggle, as beaming Ivory followed, leaving pools of flour across the floor in her wake. After a moment, Carrot stepped forward. He found her hoofprint behind the flower. He could not know why, but felt himself selecting the most perfect one. An odd sensation floated over him, and before he even completed the act, he pressed his hoof into the flower beside it. The two prints stood there together in a thin sea of flour, side by side, and with him something sung happily.
Go home, lad, spoke Trammell. You're coming down with something, and you're no good to me at the moment.
I'm sorry. Am I ill? Replied Carrot. I don't feel sick. I feel great, actually.
I should say so, replied Trammell as he cleared the flour from the stall. That's one of the symptoms of lovesickness, you know.
Carrot looked back at the stallion's insight grew on his face. Once his eyes fell back onto two perfect hoof prints as his face lit with enlightenment. I'm falling in love, he called, his features brightening. Oh, Celestia, I'm falling in love! You know, we've all know the story of how I set this up back in the Fall origin of how me and Trixie met in this dimension. But I also remember another reason I started this channel. I had started this video. This channel started off first as just me wanting to do a fun little fan-made MST3K thing with Sonic, Shadow, and Goku. I've long since deleted the videos because I wanted to change the channel's direction. But I started to do these live reads merely because my brother needed to hear these. I wanted to let my little brother actually hear and see some of these awesome stories that were being told. The problem being, like Sweet Taste of Cake and other stories out there, there were no live reads. If you were to look at a lot of channels reading fanfics, a lot of these would fall into either horror stories, like what Lost Narrator does, crossovers, past sins, or Fallout Equestria. And if not those, just
silly little one-shots or comedies. Or the worst ones, where a couple of dude bros would find a really, really bad fanfic, or a fanfic with a weird fetish and go, ha ha ha, see, look at how weird the bronies are. Look at how bad their fanfics are. Let's make fun of those fics. Ho 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 ho. Ha ha ha. Quite frankly, the latter one was annoying. And I was kind of getting tired of seeing nothing but Fallout. I mean, there's so many other great fics out there that aren't just one-shots or silly comedies or even grimdark. They're romance, adventure, action. So, being inspired by the likes of Obab and some of the other ones, I decided, let's make my own channel. So that way, my little brother could actually listen to some of these fics that he hasn't been having a chance to read. Because every time I told him, hey, read one of these stories, he would never find the time to. So, I decided to, why not? I had a headset, I had a laptop. Why not just sit down and read a bunch of stories that some people have never had a chance to see or hear? And like with my femfics and fanfics and stuff, it's never been about the popularity. It's never been about getting the most views. It's always been about the fun, the exploration, and the fun little riffs. Looking back now, I can tell you one thing. A lot of my first year videos aren't as good as my recent ones. Mainly because I had a crappy headset mic. I would leave in a lot of bloopers, stuff like that. I got better stuff now. I have Audacity, of course Yeti. But back then, I was just new. Been practicing for so long. It was a fun first year too. Some of the fanfics I got weren't exactly blowing away, but they were ones that I were interested in and decided to try. I also started Fanfic Fridays because I felt like that was a good way to take a break in between some of the long ones. It's also kind of why I also started doing Luniverse. Because I felt like Luniverse needed its own show. Because that's the way they treated it. And I wanted to give its own series. Which was a lot of fun too. And, oh look, here's something I hadn't done in ages. As leaving comments as I review this. Well, let's get to the next chapter.